Good evening. On behalf of the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Lenfest Institute for Journalism, thank you all for joining us tonight. I know it's not always easy to get around Center City around 6 o'clock on a weekday, so thanks for making the effort to come out. I think your efforts to be here will be rewarded because we have a really special edition of Inquiring Minds, which, for those of you who don't know, is our monthly live journalism series where we invite you, the community, into our home to have live, unscripted conversations with our reporters, editors, photographers, and other journalists. So tonight's event is special because we're hearing from our spectacular Lenfest fellows, and they'll be telling us some of the stories behind the stories from their fantastic Made in Philly series. After their presentation, we'll have time for a Q&A, so please keep all of your great questions and hold on to them till the end. And in just a few moments, you'll be hearing from our colleague Michael Days, the former Philadelphia Daily News editor, now our Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. And he will introduce you to the Lenfest Fellows and tell you a little bit more about Made in Philly. But first, please welcome for a few words, joining us from First Trust Bank, our sponsor this evening, Peggy Lyman-Cooler, Chief Operating Officer.
Can you guys hear me okay? If I'm not using the microphone. I have never been told I have a problem projecting, so I'm just going to take a minute and stand right here and do this. On behalf of First Trust Bank, we are very excited to sponsor this series. And as I stand up here, what I want to share with you guys quickly is First Trust Bank, if you don't know us, we were made in Philly. Just like what we're talking about here tonight, what's going on, right? Peggy Lyman-Cooler, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of First Trust Bank. Peggy Lyman-Cooler is made in Philly, right? I'm a Philly girl myself. So the bank started in South Philly, and I was born and lived in Northeast Philly. And the story of the bank, which is an awesome one, is we're a third-generation family business. So in 1934, Sam Green, who founded the bank, lived in South Philly. He came here, he was a Hungarian immigrant. And he went to, I feel like I'm going to look at you guys when we're talking. He learned how to speak English at the Free Library of Philadelphia on the Parkway. And he was a salesperson, and he sold things. He sold shoes, he sold jewelry, he sold all kinds of things. But he had a neighbor who went to get a mortgage, worked for the post office, and went to get a mortgage, and wasn't able to get a mortgage. And the neighbors were in and out with it. The guy had worked for the post office for 20 years, and he wasn't able to get a mortgage because at the time he was in, at that time, a marginalized community, Jewish immigrants. He wasn't able to get a mortgage. And everybody said, we should do something. Somebody should do something. And Sam Green said, I'm going to be that somebody. And so he started, at the time, First Federal Savings and Loan, which became, about 20 years later, First Trust Bank. And the bank today, our CEO, is run by Sam's grandson, Richard Green, who's our CEO. And we are and always have been about Philly and about community and about bringing prosperity to Philadelphia, its communities, its people, First Trust employees, and kind of the region at large. So we are super excited to be presenting and involved with Made in Philly, and I cannot wait to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you.
So thanks much, Evan, and thanks so much to First Trust Bank for being the sponsor. I think it's our first sponsor for Inquiring Minds. But I think that deserves a little applause. And thank all of you folks for coming out this evening for this conversation about the Lenfest Fellows Group Initiative, Made in Philly. But I do want to take a minute or two to talk about how these remarkable young journalists ended up at the Philadelphia Inquirer. You know, I was lucky enough to be assigned at the end of 2017 to canvass the country looking for emerging journalists of color to join us here for the inaugural fellowship program that would last 2 years. It would be one piece of our intentional strategy funded by the Lenfest Institute to make our newsroom and our entire company more reflective of the diversity in our city and in our region. No brain surgery here. If you want to appeal to diverse audiences, it's best to have a diverse staff, right? We spread the word through colleges and universities and worked with social media. We traveled and talked directly to more than a few applicants and more than a few educators and editors and rank and file journalists throughout the country for their recommendations. By mid-February of last year, we had some 130 applications. And we up bringing in 11 candidates for interviews with all the key editors. You might say that the 6 seated here won, but it was really the Inquirer, the Lenfest Institute that really won. We wanted young people who could begin to help us navigate neighborhoods where we had not always had a presence, and help us charter the audience full of millennials who had not naturally come to the Inquirer.com and our content. We charged them with developing an ongoing project. It's not rocket science. We needed help. So they've been on HYY, URD, NBC 10. They've had coffee and conversation gatherings across the city. And you'll hear about what else is coming before we leave this evening. With that, I wanted to introduce you to our fellows, who, by the way, just completed the first full year here in mid-June. Okay, now all the way to the end is Leticia de Correa. Leticia is a bilingual journalist who was born in New York, but spent her formative years in the Dominican Republic. She graduated from college there, then earned a master's degree from CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, where she honed her digital storytelling skills. In the Dominican Republic, she interned at the Listín Diario, the oldest paper there, where she won a national award for her work on sustainable tourism. At the Inquirer, she is exploring and covering the region's Latino communities and giving us a presence that had not existed. Next to her is Yarby Walker, who is a native of Houston, Texas, and is focusing her fellowship working in the sports department and exploring the intersections of sports, race, gender, and life for our readers. She's a graduate of Syracuse University, where she majored in journalism and marketing. While there, she created a bi-monthly magazine dedicated to giving the school's soccer, hockey, and track and field teams, among others, their due. She also penned a weekly business column for the Daily Orange and co-hosted a podcast that focuses largely on professional football and college and professional basketball. In addition, she was selected as one of the 12 journalism students from across the U.S. to attend the University of Missouri Sports Journalism Institute. Our next fellow is Talisa C. Johnson. She told us she's always about telling impactful stories about everyday people. She now writes about poverty and inequities and has fashioned a mini beat covering the city's library system. Before coming to Philly, she was a breaking news intern at the Dallas Morning News and the Tampa Bay Times. She's also an intern at the News Journal in Wilmington, Delaware, her hometown. She was a fellow with ProPublica's Emerging Reporter Program and a reporting fellow with the New York Times Student Journalism Institute. She's a graduate of Florida A&M University School of Journalism and Graphic Communication. At FAMU, she was a 2-time editor of the award-winning Journey magazine. Next to her is KRISTEN Balderas. She left her beloved Rio Grande Valley to attend the University of Texas, Austin. She earned a degree in journalism and public relations there, and now produces video and multimedia content for the Inquirer's Arts and Entertainment Desk. She proclaims herself a digital content creator and marketer with an unyielding passion for videography and documentary filmmaking. She's produced stories for KLRU, the public broadcasting station in Austin, and Texas Student Media. She produced and edited short videos on artists of color working in Austin for a website that she co-founded. She's also an intern at marketing promotion company C3 Presents and Do 512. The next fellow is Inquiring Batani. She's working on the health and science desk. She's covering issues on young adults with a focus on mental health issues. She came to the Inquirer after a year-long fellowship working on the health team at WYNC, which is New York City's NPR affiliate, where she reported local health stories and worked on a national podcast about adults with autism. She's interned on the health science desk at the New York Times. She's interned at CNBC.com, the Texas Tribune, and the Hartford Courant. She's a Connecticut native and a graduate of Northeastern University. She was a weekend reporter at the Boston Globe while she attended school there. I think I've got everybody now with Heather right, because sometimes I mess this up. Okay, we have Heather Khalifa. She specializes in documentary photojournalism and multimedia storytelling. She's a general assignment photographer at the Inquirer and has said that she is at her best when she is covering community stories that involve religion, race, and ethnicity. She's a recent graduate from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism and earned an undergraduate degree from Stony Brook University on her native Long Island. She was a photo intern at mllive.com/advanced publications in Saginaw, Michigan, and was a multimedia fellow at Scripps Howard in Washington, where she reported daily from the White House and Capitol Hill. She was the multimedia editor at her college newspaper. So as you can see, different areas, different departments, but they've all come together to work collectively on Made in Philadelphia. And I think that's probably a good cue in, Jamie, to our short video about the origins of the Made in Philly initiative.
For me, Made in Philly is an opportunity to give people what they've been asking for. People are always telling me when they find out that I'm a journalist, why isn't the news more positive?
I was in North Philly for a story about trends in Black teens smoking. So I was often going up to people on the street and asking them about their smoking habits. I talked to a group of high school students, and at the end, one of them said, hey, why did you choose to come to my neighborhood to do this? A lot of people feel that the media and journalists in general only focus on certain communities or neighborhoods for bad things.
People value news and they value what ends up in the paper. And so when things seem imbalanced, that can start to be reflected in the way that you feel about yourself and the way that you see yourself and the way that you see your community. And so I think that this is our attempt to make a way for positive news and for stories that people actually want to read about how people are making changes in their community.
That's what Made in Philly does. It gives you someone that is working hard on trying to make a difference. We are giving a serious voice to youth on a local basis. We are doing journalism that is giving a platform to millennials and young people in Philadelphia who are actually creating this city for the future.
We have to tell the stories about crime. We have to tell the stories about injustices, but we also want to tell the stories that highlight all of the ways that these negative things are going to be changed in a positive way because of the people in Philadelphia that are doing so. Those are the stories that deserve to be told.
Media outlets cover things negatively because that's what's gonna drive clicks. But I think that through our Made in Philly project, we're trying to take positives and trying to find folks that are doing positive things. I think that that's all of our jobs as journalists, is to present stories that are interesting rather than highlighting the negative.
For communities here who often feel underreported, and if they are reported on, it's something to do with crime or opioids or just generally negative coverage. I think Made in Philly is a super important project.
What we're going to do now, there are 5 stories that we're very excited to share with you, and we're going to so we'll be talking about that a bit and showing videos, and I guess there's some photos as well. And we're going to leave plenty of time for questions from the audience. Cindy, I think we're going to start with you. Yes, you
throw it away, Mike. Throw it away.
Okay. You did a story about the issue of breastfeeding in communities of color, Black communities, brown communities. And it's a good story, obviously, but there's some audio to go with it that is in both English and Spanish, which we had not done a lot of here. We're doing more of it. You want to set up your video, set up the audio a bit, we can talk a little bit more about why that story was important to you and to our readers.
Sure thing. I would start by saying that this was a story that I found by attending a medical appointment in Northeast Philadelphia. And by visiting this clinic, I would have to go back a year and say about the experience that we were having on trying to reach Latino communities as a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I remember we were in the 3rd week of work, and I was working with Cassie Owens, with Steve Falk on an assignment, covering porch gate pieces in Fair Hill specifically. And there was a resident who in 2 occasions, right Steve, we went to photograph her in her home to be able to portray the story, and she left us waiting for an hour. now we're 15, and now we're 25. Then we learned that it was the block captain of the area was intimidating her to not have conversations with reporters from the Inquirer. And that's when we learned that dropping a journalist that is brown, has curly hair, and speaks Spanish wasn't a good strategy to be able to get these people to trust us. So we had to change the strategy. And that strategy was to walk the streets, talk to their community leaders, to actually be a part of their daily activities. And part of that was to be at their hospitals, be a patient at their clinics. And that's where I learned at the Women's Health Center in Northeast, specifically, about this project. It's called Breastfeeding Latinas, where Black and Hispanic women are trying to educate women of their own communities about the benefits of breastfeeding, considering the disparities that babies of Black and Hispanic backgrounds have in Philadelphia. There are fewer babies of Latino and Black background who have breastfeeding initiation compared to Asian and white women or Caucasian women. And they also have higher rates of infant mortality, no prenatal care, and low birth weight. So these women of color are educating women before or after their appointment with the doctor about the benefits of breastfeeding, and also trying to follow up with them at home so that they can continue breastfeeding throughout the first 6 months or even throughout the first year. At the same time that they're trying to gain themselves a board certification to be able to become lactation consultants. So it's kind of a dual thing where they themselves are trying to go through this ladder of tasks to be able to get the goal done and become professionals in the lactation industry and the profession itself, but at the same time helping the women of their own background to understand and be more aware and empowered when it comes to breastfeeding. So in this case, we have a segment, a fraction of a audio news feature that goes with this Made in Philly story. And what you will listen to is the reporter trying to narrate the importance of these women of trying to educate their own community. And so you will learn more about Marinese Lemon and Faith Peterson, who are two doulas and lactation counselors who have been working with the community, and also from Ileana Berrios, who is the person who leads the Breastfeeding Latinas project and is one of the only bilingual lactation board certified consultants in the East area of the state of Pennsylvania.
African American specialists like Peterson and Lemon work in North Philadelphia while pushing to become certified lactation counselors and consultants. Dr. Heron says it's fundamental for a lactation professional to understand the cultural background of their clients, but there are not enough women of color in Philadelphia in the profession.
It's always better for people to hear from people that are like them. There's hardly any Black lactation consultants, and for bilingual, there's just not very many. We need to make it a part of the culture.
Ileana Berrios is the only Spanish bilingual consultant who holds an international board certification at Temple University Hospital's maternal care. She can train women right after they've given birth and make diagnoses, including if a child is tongue-tied. She says organizations like Maternity Care Coalition and Health Connect One provide grants and education programs for women to provide breastfeeding counseling on a volunteer basis. But it can be unrealistic for specialists to get certified, especially if they are the only providers in their household.
Many of us, again, come into this field after we have children. That's when we gain interest. So battling, having children, and studying, learning while your 2-year-old is screaming, or helping someone with homework when you yourself have homework, it's very hard.
The cost of getting certified depends on the amount of experience a person has, which can include college credits, books, $1,050 worth of exams, as well as accumulating 90 clinical hours at night. Berrio says the cost is one of the reasons why few Latina and African American women show interest in the profession, especially when they have to consider childcare. Ana Tapia is the Spanish bilingual breastfeeding specialist who leads the lactation support program at Congreso in Fair Hill since 2006. On average, Tapia sees 180 mothers per year for a 6-month period. She says there's a lot of individual and cultural nuances when it comes to breastfeeding.
La cultura tiene que ver cómo nuestras familias nos indican que son. Hay culturas que estamos acostumbrados a amamantar al bebé y lo hacemos naturalmente, porque eso es la forma como nos han criado. Pero hay culturas que nunca han amamantado al bebé, entonces no saben cómo hacerlo.
And that's how you have your source explain in their language in the best way that they can do as possible, sound confident in a confident tone about their expertise, without an interruption or a translation on top of it. Just have the reporter come back in, paraphrase, and continue with the narration of the story. That seems more inclusive. It helps people feel that they're being represented and respected. And it also helps for other brains to be able to get used to accents and, Spanish language, considering that we're the second country with the largest Spanish-speaking population. So I think that that's an interesting way of trying to, weave things into our reporting.
I think you and I have talked a bit about Latinos being the mainstream, certainly in this region, certainly in this city, so it's great to see that. What was the response to that story?
Well, the first thing is that Ana Tapia was not expecting that she was going to run full in Spanish. And she actually said thank you, because she told her story in the language that she felt comfortable speaking. And that's a plus. That's good. It's also good that people who understand Spanish and hear it from a mainstream traditional media outlet like the Inquirer, they actually understand that the paper takes a statement with this type of actions. So the response from people who actually listened to this was, wow, the Inquirer is actually defending Latinos. And we did not write that anywhere, but that's an interpretation that they do, because we are doing something that was not being done before, and because of how ethnic and community media outlets cover Latinos regularly, anytime you cover these communities is taking a stand for them. So it's sending a message to these communities that we're interested, that we want to do it responsibly, and that we are a part of their struggles and their communities.
And you feel like the message is getting through by your beating the streets, literally, talking to people all over?
I can say that we're not being pushed out of communities anymore.
That's good to hear.
That's good. We're also being held accountable by these people. And that's also interesting. When things are not being framed in a way that are totally accurate or could have been said in a different way, they also come back and they say, hey, mira, let's do this differently.
That's you saying. Okay, so we're moving on to our next story about a group of young men, pretty much, 15, 16 or older. They have a production studio called Jump Button Studio.
Yes.
Talk about them. How did you find them? They may have been written about. I don't recall until you jumped in
No,
there.
they actually were never written about. And so this is the most recent Made in Philly story that I had the opportunity to do. And it was about this 22-year-old named Nicodemus Made It, who he co-founded this tech startup called Jump Button Studios. And it sort of originated because he was struggling to find his own way into the tech industry. Nicodemus is one of those people who knows very early on what he wants to do, and he's very headstrong. He's like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So he taught himself how to code, and by the time he was a freshman in high school, he was sending off applications to Google and Apple and Comcast, trying to get internships, because that was the kind of work that he wanted to do.
he never heard back, and when the application would get to the point of asking for a college, he would just leave it blank. And eventually, he was able to meet people online through gaming and different things that he was doing online who wanted to help him co-found this studio. So Jump Button was founded in 2015 by he was still in high school, so they were all teenagers. And since then, they've gained national recognition as a tech startup that's creating educational animations, educational videos, mobile apps, mobile games, computer apps, computer games, you name it. They've recently made an animation for someone who was running for city council. They debuted a new game at Philly Tech Week. Nicodemus himself has been honored twice and invited to visit the White House twice, once while he was still in high school, under the Obama administration. And their story is just, it's one of those stories that's so incredible that you're gonna hear it multiple times. So that was actually Nicodemus's case. We heard about him through our submission form, we heard about him through word of mouth, we heard about Jump Button and everything that they were doing in multiple ways. And so I met with Nicodemus back in January, and we had this really long talk because his mind moves 1,000 miles a minute. And so we sat at this coffee shop and we just kind of talked about everything that they were doing. And then I sort of followed him over the next couple of months as things started to grow and progress. So I got to visit their co-working space in West Philly as they were building this animation, which we'll show you in a minute. And I got to, meet some of the high schoolers that they now bring in. So the idea of Jump Button is for it to be a launch pad and sort of a startup that will, like an incubator that will give opportunities to young people of color who want to go into the tech field, because diversity in tech is still an issue. There are Pew studies on it, things like that. And so with Jump Button, he was sort of trying to create a space for people to come and get those opportunities if they're too young to, say, apply for internships at Google and Apple. He just wanted Jump Button to be the place where people could get their jump start. So with that, we will show.
Maybe we're gonna talk about
Oh no!
After commercials.
Right, right back on our commercial break. But we will show, momentarily, we'll show the animation that they made for Aaron Santimore, who was running for city council. But essentially, there are about 15 people. They're all paid, well, not paid. They're all volunteers with part-time jobs because they haven't yet ascended to the point of being able to give salaries. But even in this last year, they've doubled the amount of income that the company has made, and they've expanded their partnerships. They're partnering now with some influencers on YouTube. They're partnering with the city to bring in interns this summer. They're just doing a lot of partnerships. They partner with schools. He's a graduate of New Foundations Charter School, and so they go back there to talk to students at Career Day, teach them about STEM, talk to them about their interests, help them with coding, like all of those different things. So a lot of his mission with Jump Button is really reaching back into the community and finding ways to give back the opportunities that he felt that he didn't have. No? I keep going. I know, I feel like it's a flop.
Talk a little bit about the response to that story. There was, a very positive story, profiling men of color, young men of color, doing really amazing positive stuff.
Yeah, there were a lot of people. Well, there were a lot of people who were like, how could I not have heard about this kid before? Like, he's 22 and he's been to the White House twice. Like, he's a young roots future, or a young futurist for the Root. Like, he's just won like Philly Geek Awards, different tech awards. It's sort of like, how did we miss this, right? And so after the story ran, there was a lot, I started getting emails left and right, like, oh, how can we partner with them? I want to reach out. What's next for them? What's happening with them? Different things like that. It was a really, really good response. It was just a really great response to the story.
You got it.
I think we got it, okay. I was wondering if we were going to have to go old school for the next hour.
I know. How long am I going to have to finesse this? Like, okay. So this is an example of, and we'll turn the sound on, but this is an example of an animation. Yeah, I'm like, I think she knows. It's her cursor, I think. The cursor acts weird on me.
Meet Eric in Santamar, mom, wife, public servant, candidate for city council at large. Erin spent her entire career making cities run better, saving money so that we can put more funding towards our schools, city services, creating programs like Philly 311, and consulting other cities across the United States so they can do the same. Now Erin wants to bring that vision and ability to get things done to City Council to make our city cleaner, attract and retain talented people and businesses, and make sure Philadelphia is living up to our potential.
So I actually got to be in the room with, there were probably about 5 of them. They're all under 22. They're probably between, I would say, 16 and 22. And sort of sit in the room with them and listen to them make these decisions about, how Erin is gonna look in this and, what does this color mean and how do we, show everything that she's trying to do. It was just really fascinating and it's just a really incredible story, and I was really glad to be able to do it because I think it points to the larger sort of mission that we're trying to get at, which is like, this is something that was so incredible where it's like, how are you missing this, right? Those are the stories that we're trying to illuminate. So I feel like that was really on brand.
Very much so. Thank you so much. Okay. So I think we're ready to move on to the next story, which is, I will admit, it's one of my favorites. It's the North Philly Junior Barber Academy. There's so many barbershops all over Philadelphia. Heather and Eric, how did you find this story? How did that happen?
So I actually, just waiting for this to come on.
Is that one?
Yeah, I'll project. So I actually found the story on Instagram. I don't know if anyone else, I follow No Gun Zone, and he posts a lot of grim gun violence type of stories, but one of the things he had actually posted was about a guy, I think in West Philly, was it? Yeah, a guy in West Philly who was using his skills as a barber to teach his 2 young sons. And the point was just kind of teaching like responsibility and, also making them think about, being fiscally responsible in the future and whatnot, and giving them a skill. So when I saw that, it stood out to me right away, and I thought, oh, this could be a great story. And especially for me being like a photographer, I'm always looking for visual stories, so I thought this could be it. So we actually went to go visit him in West Philly. And long story short, we had a great conversation, great filming, but something about barber laws that I didn't know about, but she did. So she told him about it, and he was like, oh, maybe not, maybe I won't do the story. But instead, he told us about Michael, who has this junior barbershop academy. And so he invited us into his basement in his North Philly home where he, I think 10 teens, or there's a good amount of young teens and young adults there, just learning how to, be barbers, and it was a really cool story, so we'll show that now.
Did you take care of the top section, everybody? Make sure that front gets some love right here. My name is Pete Michael, and this is the Junior Barber Academy. Junior Barber Academy is a 6-week class that I created in this year, in July. And it's where I take young kids and teach them how to cut hair. The idea came from me just thinking of kids going to college, thinking about them as well as just servicing people in the community as well as cutting their self. And I'm thinking when you go to college, what's the one thing that you need the most is I need finances, right? So I'm thinking of teaching kids how to cut their hair so they don't have to call home and ask mom for money. Along with the hair cutting process, I teach them mentoring, and we talk about different things and strategies on how to succeed. You feel what I'm saying, Juan? I'm not sitting there doing like this and I bet you I'm gonna miss. I'm doing this and saying, I bet you I'm gonna make this shot. Of course, with a 30-minute talk, and we'll sit down and I talk with the kids about some things, and they're just things that I went through and things I struggled when I was growing up. So I kind of put that inside the curriculum a little bit and just go over with them some things that I think they need and some things that I think will make them successful in life beyond barbering.
Great job.
Bird, thank you, man. Thanks, Mr. Bird, y'all. I think one of the coolest parts about it is I have been with people through that first interview. that prom, you know what I mean, going on prom and getting a haircut for your birthday. And that means I'm at the beginning of a special moment in their life. So to me, it makes me feel good to service people, to service my community, to be in charge of somebody just looking good and feeling good about themselves.
This is creating the flow in his head. And that's, if we know the flow.
I mainly hope that they get the service part out of it, that they now want to learn how to give back and just use their skill to do something good. Like, hey, I'm going to take care of a family member, or I'm going to cut somebody here that doesn't have the money to go to the barbershop on a regular. The class is over, man. I'll see y'all next week. If anybody want to brush up on their skills before the graduation day next Saturday, you are welcome to come and study, right? Hey, your mom or dad text me, please.
Mary, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so this was one of the first stories the week we launched Made in Philly. This was one of our first stories. And I think it really reinforced for us what this project is about and what we're trying to do. So what P. Michael is doing, there's not a lot of fanfare to it. He's not advertising, I'm changing the world, I'm teaching kids. He's just doing this on his own in his basement. This is a guy who taught himself how to cut hair because when he was a teen, his mom couldn't afford to get him a haircut and he was teased about it. And so he learned to do it himself, and now he's passing that on to other people. And so I think when we think about what makes a Made in Philly story, right, it's people at the grassroots level who are doing things for their community for the purpose of helping their community. They're not necessarily looking for our attention. And also looking at all the different things he's teaching them, right? It's not just about cutting hair. As you saw, he's talking about self-esteem and confidence. You take a shot thinking you're gonna make it, not thinking you're not. When we spent, we both went to different classes with him, he talks about punctuality, being on time is late, being early is on time. Really basic things, and some of the kids in those classes are 7 years old, 10 years old, so they're getting so much valuable information at such a young age. And I think for us, portraying those types of stories and those efforts at such a community level is exactly what Made in Philly is about.
What was the response to that package?
The response to that was great, and I think for a lot of Made in Philly stories, as you heard from Tilly said, lots of people reach out to us saying, how can we support this effort? We really love what this person is doing. So I got over, a few dozen emails of people wanting to donate to keep the Junior Barber Academy going, because basically P. Michael gives the kids, the equipment, he buys them all the plastic mannequins you saw, and he does that from his own budget. And so a bunch of people wrote in and they ended up sending him donations to keep that going. And that's awesome to see for us.
So, I think some of the old heads might think that millennials aren't volunteering to do wonderful things, but your story, Darby, sort of dispels that notion. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I could first. Hello? Okay. I could first talk about how I found the story. I was doing a series on the Special Olympics and special needs athletes, and the lady who reached out to me, she was at one of the, I think they were training over at the University of Delaware, and she apparently saw me there and then reached out to me to sort of tell me about some students at Arcadia University who were going every Thursday out to have this volleyball clinic at the Bryn Arthur, I think that's how you pronounce it, church school. And so they've been doing this for 30 years. It's called their Rotary Club, and they host these volleyball clinic sessions for about 60 special needs athletes. And a lot of the times people with special needs, like you speak to them and they're kind of like, we're left out of stuff, like we're never included in things. And so being out there speaking with those athletes and then sort of hearing their stories and hearing from the parents. This happened also to be around the time where Betsy DeVos was taking $2.2 million from this the Special Olympics budget. And so speaking to parents there who I think 2 days prior, they were learning of the news, they were sort of saying sort of how they were sort of disgusted with everything and like how their children are constantly sort of the target of things. So getting that information, and then also a couple of weeks prior, the state of Pennsylvania was removing money from their budget in terms of working. I'm not sure who's sort of familiar with these, I guess they're called like factory factories where they have special needs people. They work there for a little bit over minimum wage because a lot of these people, like, they don't live alone, and so that's their way of getting income. And so the athletes ages 18 to 60, I think, was the oldest. They basically work through those factories and things like that, and they were trying to take about 25% of the money used to pay them. So it was just a lot of sort of political things that were going on at the time of this story, but yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and play the video. What were you gonna say? Oh, okay. The video.
There's a video as well.
Yeah. That Heather did. I don't know if she wants to add anything.
Do you want to add something?
Sure. No, just like, honestly, filming this video was fun because you could like feel the energy of the gym, and like the college students were so genuinely like excited to help these athletes. So I think that transcends into the video. So.
We are at our Bryn Athern Church School, and this is our practice now for Special Olympics volleyball. All of our athletes are involved in everything we do. We're still skill building, but all of our athletes are all on the floor getting equal playing time. They're equal invitations to all of our tournaments, all of our social events. So that's why we're like one big family, is that everybody gets a chance to do something here for the Special Olympics group. The most rewarding part about working with these guys and the special athletes is that they're full of joy, pretty much on a regular basis. They're just very optimistic. This is like a group of gold. So anybody that touches this group turns to gold. So it's a close-knit group of family, friends, tons of volunteers, and everybody always smiles. So sometimes the volunteers have more fun than the athletes themselves.
What kind of response did you get on that piece?
Yeah, it was a good response. I just think that, like, for this particular story, like, I guess the big thing, and I think you guys see that in the video, is sort of family. Even people as college students at Arcadia that were part of this Rotary Club, they are still involved. Like Dave that spoke in that video, he graduated from the school in 2000, and he sort of is the director that initiates a partnership between Special Olympics and the Rotary Club. So they put on volleyball tournaments and things like that, but just getting a general sense of like how people are sort of ingrained in this group even after graduating, and years later they're still out there sort of trying to orchestrate things and keep those connections alive. So.
Okay. So we've got one more piece we want to talk about, Inquiring, KRISTEN, and about Ms. Lakeisha Anthony.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite stories to have done, just because we got to know Lakeisha so well. But this was actually a story that came in through our submission form. So online on the Made in Philly landing page, we have a call out that basically says, tell us about people in your community that we should be writing about. And it's because, you know, people in Philadelphia know their communities better than we do. They know the people who are, you know, teaching the barber shop classes in their basement, or, you know, who are leading breastfeeding initiatives. And so one of the things that came in through this form was Lakeisha Anthony works at Women Organized Against Rape. One of her co-workers sent in a nomination for her saying, you know, she's doing a lot of work around sexual assault awareness and education. And the other thing with these forms that's interesting is, you know, people type out a little bit, but we don't expect them to give us an essay about the person. So we know a little bit, and then we call the person and try to find out more. And so when I spoke to Lakeisha, we talked a little bit about her work with WAR, Women Organized Against Rape, and then she mentioned she also has her own nonprofit through which she's trying to elevate the voices of Black girls and Black women in the discussion around sexual assault and awareness, because they are disproportionately affected by these topics, but often not in the national conversations around things like Me Too, or not as, sort of their stories aren't highlighted as much, despite the fact that they are also affected. And so she was working on this. And that kind of led us to spending time with her and seeing all the different ways she's addressing this. And I will let you see in the video sort of the multiple avenues through which she's trying to address this issue.
I want to ensure that every Black woman, no matter what it is, that you don't have to be ashamed of your story, you don't have to be ashamed of your truth. Actually, your truth can actually help someone else. My name is Lakeisha Anthony. I am the CEO and founder of Voice. I am also the director of Mothers in Charge Mentoring Program, and also I'm a leader at Catalyst for Change Church. I experienced campus sexual assault when I was 19 years old. And that is the experience that really kind of put me on the level of doing this work. I am just so grateful that people get to see this part of my life, because this is the most, if you can take away everything else, give me God. Faith is just a very important factor in my life, and I honestly don't know where I would be without God. All the amazing things that people see, I don't look at it as me doing anything. It's ultimately God using me to help another person.
I feel like in that moment, God used you to help me see my purpose.
We don't really hear the voices of Black women regarding their stories. When I was going through my experience, there wasn't a Black woman that I necessarily thought, oh, I can look to say, yes, this person overcame it, so I can too. Black girls have been talking about their experiences, but it has not been amplified as it should be. They can do and be anything that they want to be in life, and that their past and their current circumstances do not dictate their future. And you need to remind yourself that daily, okay? So I want you to repeat after me. I am beautiful. Say it like you mean it. I am beautiful. I can accomplish anything I've set my mind to.
I can accomplish anything I've set my mind to.
I am great.
I am great.
And my self-esteem is intact.
And my self-esteem is intact.
How did you get that confidence? I mean, this is a very personal story that sometimes is not discussed in our communities.
Yeah, so this was also one of my favorite stories that we've worked on, and speaking to, it being a very serious topic, as well as you can see in the video, we spent a lot of time with Lakeisha, and I think that's one of the ways that we were able to tackle something so serious. So today, just to backtrack a little bit, you've seen, audio pieces, video pieces, lots of different photos, and it's because we're all digital first journalists, and we all have the ability to produce that type of content. It's something that we're all really passionate about. And so a lot of the times when you're working on a news cycle and stories that have time pegs, those things have to be done very quickly. So I'll go out on a shoot, I'll be there for 2 hours, have to come back, edit within a couple hours, and it's published. I think we worked on this for 4 months, 5 months, and we got to go to church with Lakeisha, we got to go to her mentoring program, we interviewed her at 2 different places, to a vision boarding event. And so yeah, so getting to hear from her about her experience and really letting her dictate the story and the angle, and letting us see inside her life versus us just kind of dropping in, which happens a lot and a lot of people have a problem with, which understandably so. So that has been a really great experience that I feel also carries over to our reporting and other stories. So being able to spend time on these Made in Philly stories and really see into the lives of communities that are underrepresented or have been misreported for that specific reason, because people are dropping in, has really helped us when we go out to our stories for our respective desks that aren't necessarily Made in Philly, and taking the time and attention and care with those has been really great. And I think it's also allowed us to develop really special relationships with our sources. So I don't know if you saw us, but every time a video would play, we would smile, right? Or we talk about our sources and we're like, oh, we spend so much time with them, and we have such great relationships with them, and we invite them to every event that we have. And additionally, we also have them speak about their experiences off of their stories, right? So next month, we're having an event, not next month, in September, we're having an event that's called On the Table, and they're roundtable talks, and we're inviting our sources to come and lead discussions about the issues or the solutions that they're facing and that they're proposing. And I think that happens because we've gotten such an inside look on their lives, and they've opened up so much to us that we're now we want you to offer that and be available to other people in the community. And that's become a really important part of this project, just being available and being a resource in a way, and allowing our sources to also serve as that.
There wasn't that long ago that reporters or journalists trying to sort of have a little distance between their sources. how did all you get to the point where you said we need to cultivate these people, not so much as friends, but as people who we can depend on from time to time, and we want to work with and help them improve Philadelphia, the region. Talk about that just a little bit. I think we got a little time before we get to questions. Anybody want to jump in? I'm looking at you guys.
Ask me one more time and then I'll dive in.
Ask me one more time.
The issue of, I know initially you had folks come in, we had a little reception here. When you started Made in Philly, people were happy to be here, and I think they were a little stunned that the Inquirer was, one, in their community, and two, inviting them into the Inquirer, which is a much more modern, contemporary take on how to deal with sources. And I sense that you all feel that way in terms of let's embrace our communities. Let's try to understand our communities. Where does that come from?
That's definitely a different question. But, well,
you asked me to rephrase it.
It's okay. I'll just talk about sourcing because I think that sourcing more generally has been something that we've all been trying to navigate in this sort of new space of not just trying to meet these people and sort of have a one and done with the story, but also to utilize them to further reach into their communities or to build these bonds with them. And I think it's sort of like balancing a fine line. I know when we did have the reception, there were a lot of people who were like, wow, like, this is my first time in the Inquirer. This is what it looks like. And they just felt so grateful to be able to be allowed into this space. And so I find that with sourcing, a lot of it comes with like trust building over time. Like KRISTEN was saying, spending a lot of time with people and having them understand that you're also just a person. I think sometimes people don't meet actual journalists, and so they're like, wait, you're a journalist? But I think that with sourcing, it's been sort of trying to educate on, to a degree, educating on like, what does it mean to be a source? This is a professional relationship, so what does that mean? Like, what are my intentions with meeting here with you? I think those are all things that we have to establish in the forefront, because with a lot of these sources, they're coming from communities where they haven't really dealt with the media and they haven't really interacted with journalists before. And so they don't know what's fair game and what's not and where the boundaries are. And so I find that a lot of my time, at least with my sources, I'm sort of explaining, like with Nicodemus, I was the first reporter that he had ever talked to. So I sort of had to explain to him, like, okay, this is sort of what our relationship will be. I'd love to sort of, follow you through different things, just kind of explaining those things. I find that that's been a part of this project too, and I think that's specifically because we're reaching into communities that historically haven't been covered or haven't had run-ins with the media.
Very good. One more thing, and then he's going to be our Oprah Winfrey for the evening, I think. A couple people mentioned submission forms. Somebody tell, how does that work? How do you submit an idea?
So it's super simple. We tried to make it as easy as possible. If you go to inquirer.com/madeinphilly, there's, I believe, a button that says have an idea, but it's a blue button. You just click on it, and what'll pop up is this form that asks you, who is the person you're nominating? If you have their contact info, how do we get in touch with them? Why are you nominating them? And if you're comfortable, you can leave your name and your contact info so we can talk to you about this person and why what they're doing is so great. And if you don't want to leave your name or contact info, that's totally fine too. We just want to hear great ideas from people, and we have already, right? We've gotten, like Leticia said, Nicodemus came from that form. Lakeisha Anthony's story came from that form. Several other stories that we've done have come in from people reaching out to us and saying, you've missed out. This great thing is happening and no one's covered it. Like, come do it. And we would love to do that. So.
Thank you.
Questions? Any questions about specific stories or generally for our fellows? Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa Gabrielle. I'm a Philadelphia creative. I want to say first, thank you to the Philadelphia Inquirer and all you lovely fellows for putting together such an impactful event. This is also my first time in the office, and it's really cool to be in like the newsroom. It's really cool. And my question for you all is, I think what was so interesting when we were talking about all your different bios was you guys are all from different cities and different states all throughout the country, and I wanted to know, of course, Philly's your favorite for sure, but what kind of sets Philadelphia apart from all the other cities that you guys have been reporting in and learning about?
Tell the truth. Go ahead.
Well, I actually came back here. I was sort of returning home. So I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, and before I was here, I was in Tampa. I had been in Dallas, basically everywhere but home, much to my parents' dismay. And coming back to, there's really nothing like Philadelphia. Like, I see it through an entirely different lens now that I'm an adult and I'm a reporter, and I'm learning like the intricacies of the neighborhoods and, you know, just how like people from Philly, you know they're from Philly because Philly people are hardcore and they love their city and they're gonna let you know. And I think there's like this hometown pride that comes with it. But at the same time, Philly has a lot of struggles. And it's a city that's mostly black and brown, and it's a city that is just dealing with so many different things. And so I think in that regard, in comparison to other places that I've been, I found that this place has been very fruitful for stories. Like, for example, so I, for a time, wrote about the city's public library system, and I was just writing about the libraries. And you know, of course, it's Philly, so there are people who are super passionate about the libraries that came out of the woodworks. But it's just like being able to learn about the city in a different way, at least in my experience, has been just one of the greatest experiences of this fellowship. And I think Philly has been, like, they deal with a certain type of issues because I feel like the city is mostly black and brown, and so it's sort of peculiar in that way. Like, you're dealing with a different population than any of the cities that I've reported in before, because Dallas was not like this. And when I was at the Tampa Bay Times, I was in Pasco, which is sort of the like woodsy county that sits on top of Hillsborough, which is like Tampa. So it's very different just being in a city, being, you know, in a city that's mostly black and brown, and all these issues that they're facing and grappling with and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll add a little to that also, just because I completely agree, and also being from Texas, which is also a very prideful place. Very much so. I mean, I get pulled into writing articles about like the Texas take all the time. So yesterday I wrote about the Bluebell licking incident, if anybody has seen that, because I did the like Texans are upset because Bluebell is the equivalent to Wawa, right? Like Philadelphia also has its things and Texas has them too. And I was actually talking to my mom about this the other day, and she was like, how did you move like 2,000 miles away from where you grew up? And like, why are you continuing to be so far away from me, right? Like we had that conversation. There's just something here, and I think what Tyler says is completely accurate. Like there's so much pride in this city, and I think another like kind of going back to sourcing, like these communities are so tightly knit and like so interconnected, which makes them so powerful and like interesting to be a part of. So I've reported a lot of my Made in Philly stories also center like queerness and like queer people of color. And so I think for every single one following the first one was like, oh, you need to go talk to like this organization that is doing similar work to me. And I very much so found that everybody really wants to elevate each other and like exist in this like very productive and creative ecosystem, which has just been absolutely incredible. So coming from a place with a lot of pride, I also very much so say like, well, I live in Philly now, and like, you know, so it's been really great.
Hi, my name is Luis Bravo, talking about Texas Pride. I'm from South Texas, so shout out to the Rio Grande Valley. My question is, what challenges have you faced, you know, becoming involved in these communities and talking to people and reporting on the issues of Philadelphia? And what are some ways that you have like overcome them? Thank you.
And Tylisa looks at me for some reason, right? Well, besides being pushed out from neighborhoods, that's what you were looking at, right? It's been translating to communities that the fact that we're fellows doesn't mean that this is just temporary. So that's part of the challenge. It's also trying to have them understand that we know that, in my case, Latino communities is more than just Spanish speakers that live in certain pockets of the city and that have certain level of incomes when it comes to their livelihood in Philadelphia. So
trying to manage first what these communities are expecting from me as the Latino communities reporter is one thing, so I have to listen a lot to what these community leaders have to say about the struggles, the issues, what matters to these communities and what they want their reporter to report on, and also trying to listen with empathy to how we have been reporting about these communities before, and listening and dealing with it and trying to change that narrative. So when you have a community leader that says, I've been hurt for 40 years by the reporting that has been done, you come back, you cry, and then you say, how can I change this? And I think that trying to overcome is giving them a space that they can express themselves. You listen, then you ask, how can we do this better? And which is the best way for us to be able to inform and maintain a communication with you. If that's WhatsApp and Facebook, then so be it. If you want me to come back and sit with you again, then probably that's going to be the way. But it's trying to create new ways of interacting with these people. And if it has to be a newsletter, an audio broadcasted piece on a chatting app, then so be it.
I'll just add to that. I think, like Jasenia said, so much of it is listening. And a lot of it is making it up as we go, honestly, right? Like, this is a new series for us. It's a new project. We're trying new things to reach communities that we haven't before as an institution. And so that means trying out things like coffee shop talks. We, in April, May, and June, set up in different coffee shops in different neighborhoods where we wanted to reach people, and kept it very, very open, right? We're not there to find a story. We're there, the invitation was just, come talk to us about, someone you want us to write about, or just things you want to see change in news coverage about your community, and we'll buy you a cup of coffee and we just want to talk. And I think kind of having that openness is something we've been trying more and more as we plan different events, and being really open to listening no matter what they want to say. And it's not to say like we overcome all the challenges, right? We've had conversations with people, I know I have specifically, who they distrust the Inquirer for generations of issues that they've had, and my one interaction with them is not enough to change that. But maybe it's a start, and maybe if they see multiple events happening, or they see this series going on over time, maybe then they consider, okay, maybe I'm willing to go talk to them at the next event.
I'd like to say to all these young people, it's really a breath of fresh air to have you here and listen to the openness. Many of us in the Black community have been knocking on the doors of the Inquirer and majority media for a long time, trying to get them to look at stories other than the latest shooting. So we appreciate this point of view, especially from young people who are much more open, I think, to many of these issues. But I did want to ask you about the lactation story, because I think it's important to put it in context. I don't know if you really did, but I remember back in the 60s, Black and Latino women weren't given the choice about whether or not they would nurse, and they were given medicine to dry up their milk.
Formula direct.
Yes. So, because sometimes it comes across like these communities are low information, they just don't know what to do, wherein the formula, the baby formula market was marketing these drugs to that community, and many times women in that community didn't even know they had been given those drugs.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for bringing that up. Since we just projected we just ran a segment of the audio news feature. This is one of the fragments that was unfortunately left out of the conversation. But one of the specialists, which is Faith Peterson, and she's working at the Episcopal Hospital in North Philadelphia on Lehigh, and she specifically referred to how the Black and Hispanic communities were the ones who were tailored to actually use baby formula back in the day, and how she and her colleagues were trying to work against this narrative that had been established for so many years and that now had to be disrupted, right? So that's why this story is impactful, because we are trying to recode something that had been established for these communities specifically and affected these communities for a long time. So I hope that we can further the conversation and we can take a look at the story together.
So thank you so much for adding that, and also wanted to talk a little bit about how that has definitely come up with, while we're out. So just want to give a quick example of that. We were postering in Germantown for the coffee shop event that we were just talking about, where we had people come in and we bought them a cup of coffee to hear, what they wanted to see in the news, what was going on. And me and Ari walked into a diner, it was a restaurant, and we said oh, we have some flyers for an event coming up, the Inquirer is hosting, and we wanted to see if we could put some by the table by the window. And someone was working and he said, yeah, sure, you're hosting an event to talk about the gun violence here, talk about the shootings. And we totally knew where he was coming from, and we said, well, actually, no. We are here to do the exact opposite of that. We want to hear about the good things happening in your community. We want to hear about what's going on in your life that, does not have to do with that, because we know that is being covered. We know, and other people whose shops we walked into also said, I've never met an Inquirer reporter before. And so we handed out business cards and we reassured this man at the diner, we're not here to talk about that. And it has really been really eye-opening, I think, to see that. And so thank you for bringing it up again, because it's very reassuring to us, that we're doing this work and it needs to be done, because of the fact that people off the top of their heads feel the Inquirer is inaccessible. The Inquirer, is this far off institution, and it really doesn't have to be that way. And that's something that we've kind of, played with and have found a lot of comfort in. I mean, I love going and handing out my business card and being just call me, we can talk about anything, yeah. So thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, I'll come to you.
Is this fellowship limited to girls?
No.
I'm sure these girls are very, very talented, but I certainly would like to see more outreach to boys of color to be included in this conversation in next year's fellowship.
When I started looking at applications, going at the different schools, I had no intent. I mean, not that we couldn't have, that it would be a female class. But the reality is that of the finalists, 2 were men. One ultimately was just hired straight up, and the other person didn't make the cut. The reality is, if you're out and about looking for young people just out of journalism school, the majority of them are women. And the most talented folks, I thought, were women. It didn't start out that way, but that's how it ended up. Now, we'll start working on another class probably within, 6 to 8 months, and I'll have to work a little harder, I guess.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Thanks again for hosting this. I just wanted to ask about the Southwest and the African population that's there. I feel like I don't hear much about what's going on in Southwest. I feel like it's a hidden corner far away. It's such a big part of the city, but it's often not really represented in the news coverage, except again for the violence that's happening there. There's a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of businesses up and down Woodland that could get some recognition, I think. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for bringing that up. You're the guy I've been looking for. Do you know that? Do you know that? I'm gonna find you after, or please come find me, and I want to give you my card. Actually, that's something that Mike Days and I talk about a lot, is how much opportunity there is in Southwest Philly to tell all of these stories about these blossoming communities from the diaspora. And I went to a historically black college. I'm very into the diaspora, so I would love to connect with you to talk more about whatever you think the stories are there, and then maybe talk to people you know and talk to who they know, things like that. So I'm not gonna forget you. Brown hat.
Yes, Mark.
Just an idea, story idea. I would love to see a follow-up on the trying to make that note here, the North Philadelphia Junior Barber Academy. I think that I'd love to see that revisited 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now and see where some of these boys are that are getting their hair, learning to learn this trade. I think it'd be a great human interest story.
Thank you. That does sound really interesting. I'm also very curious about where they'll be.
That's all kind of the side hustle in college.
Good evening, ladies. You all look amazing, and thank you for this platform. I really appreciate it. I would like to know, how do you open yourself up to work with the Muslim community, the African American Muslim community in West Philadelphia, who I have an organization, and my platform is to bring awareness and prevention education to help end childhood sexual abuse. And I like to know how I can get my word spread, have my platform spread even further for the African American community, and especially the Muslim community. I actually have a book launch on September the 21st in West Philadelphia, and I am going to be teaching parents through the voice of an African American boy who teaches about body safety rules. So I like to see what we can do about having that information spread throughout the community with the help of you guys.
All right, first of all, assalamu alaikum. Everyone's looking at me. Everyone's looking at me because I'm the only Muslim here. Yeah, we'll talk after, honestly. I've been really trying to do more stories on the Muslim community, and I was fasting while working, so it was much more difficult than I anticipated. So I really wanted to do like some sort of photo essay on Ramadan here in Philly. And that kind of came and went. So I'm still on the prowl. So we'll talk after this for stories.
Wow, this is like super, super, super refreshing seeing this panel for sure. I'm like a young African American, well, young-ish, maybe now, but I've been consuming Philadelphia news and media for quite a long time, and seeing this sort of evolution of it is like really great. I'm very much interested in the visual space, as I teach some of that at Temple in the journalism department, and I'm interested in hearing from some of the people that do video and photos, how you like seeing your work featured in the paper, and how your instruments of storytelling are received when you're in some of these communities.
Yeah, so I'm a videographer and primarily, right, so I'm a multimedia reporter. I do all kinds of different stuff, but I have a passion for video, and a lot of the time I carry a camera in my backpack, and you're definitely right, like you're taking the camera and equipment into a community, and kind of, there's a line between like, I'm going to put this out and record you as if you're a spectacle, and then there's another line, and then the other side of the line is like, I'm going to, document your life and like see how you exist, because I think it's an incredibly moving and, ultimately emotional story that would serve really well to video. I really like to not take out my video and camera equipment the first time I meet with somebody. So, very relaxed, just kind of like scoping out what's going on, making sure that it would be a comfortable setting, checking with them. And then after that, a conversation about like, I want to be a fly on the wall while you live your life, and I just kind of want to see what happens and film that. And I think that, developing that boundary of like, I'm, here to observe you, and I just happen to have a camera with me has worked really well, and being sensitive to privacy and like different things that people think about when there's a camera in their face has been really helpful. And then I think the other side of that, like presenting it in a newspaper, has definitely been challenging, specifically like with our online redesign and our rebrands and all that, but we have a really amazing visuals department here that is really working to, elevate multimedia and visual elements. And I think that specifically here at the Inquirer, we try to make sure that our visual stories are not, carbon copies of whatever's being done in print. So something that, for a story that you saw that we worked really hard on was that Aneri didn't just pull the quotes from the video for Lakeisha's story. They were kind of two separate things that existed on their own that people could watch or read as individual pieces, but then also together kind of told a more full and well-rounded story of Lakeisha's life. And like Mike had said, we went on NBC for that, and while we were in the dressing room, and this is probably like my favorite moment I've ever had while I was here, which is why I'm going to tell you all what happened. We're sitting in the dressing room, and Lakeisha says, like, I'd never seen my story told in video, and then I also had never felt it told to such an extent, where I felt like every part of me was coming out, and like everyone was learning all about me from A to Z, like it didn't just focus on one piece of me, it was everything. And after that I said, like, I have to always tell stories that way, like I have to always let sources let me know what the most important pieces are, so that way that comes through. And then, the difficulties with the website, and like YouTube is shorting, and like it doesn't post right on Instagram like that, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you told somebody's story with a lot of integrity and that they feel close to it.
Yeah, I see the camera honestly is like the greatest tool for storytelling. So obviously I'm biased, but I think it gives me, it just opens doors. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've never had an issue ever photographing here where someone was uncomfortable or, anything like that. So for me, it opens doors, honestly. Honestly, the issue I have when I go out is people don't believe I'm a photographer here. They're like, "You work for the Inquirer? Let me see your badge. Are you legally allowed to work? How old are you?" So sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not. Yeah, I try to just tell. I use the camera, and obviously I'm very cognizant of being sensitive and telling stories through my photos like fairly and accurately. Also trying to show that human emotion and make people actually feel something when they see it. So.
Sorry, I don't stand. Speaking specifically to DRB, your story about the Special Olympics, and then you mentioned briefly about when they're working in factories just to get, I guess, a pay. So my family has been specifically working for the past 2 decades with, I live in South Jersey, so my mother and brother work with Bancroft Neurohealth. Okay. So my mom actually works with some of the individuals that you may speak of that actually go to work. And to make it more image, they do not make more than probably $1 a day. And my brother actually brought home a carved turtle yesterday, so that like popped to my mind. So I'm very curious when you're speaking about those who are special need or fall within a certain spectrum of that, you only hear narratives about Special Olympics. So when they're putting on donations or fundraising, it isn't very many articles that speak about the issues with Social Security and having to deal with their not getting factory pay, or when cuts, how it truly affects a family when cuts are being made. People think when they cut funds for Special Olympics, they're just not going to be able to swim and play volleyball in an event. I'm curious, what is a follow-up? Are you doing more of a platform on this, speaking about the disparities that are within this community?
Yeah, so in the story, I spoke to a parent, Ann Schultz, and she basically was telling me sort of how they aren't going to be in factories now, and sort of their transition. They are trying to move them into like these almost like homes, like where they're doing like the bed work and what have you, but I didn't necessarily go beyond that, just because I saw the letter, and because on March 6th, I think it was the day that the letter was sent out, that they were doing the 25% cut. So I haven't gone beyond that, but I think I'm getting more information on that. And you said that the factories are in South Jersey, like that's...
They're actually some in South Jersey and Philadelphia.
Right, okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna look further into that. Thanks. But actually, initially when they first started the partnership with the special athletes, like they weren't with Special Olympics. Special Olympics came in about 10 years ago. So 20 plus years of doing this program, they weren't through Special Olympics. It was just volunteers and people that were showing up to participate. So.
Thank you for having this program. You guys are inspirational and motivational. I'm a teacher, and I was wondering if you would do any kind of assemblies or anything to motivate the students.
Yeah, I think the sentiment is we would all love to do that, and you said it and we agreed, and Mike is right here, so he's approved it.
Hello guys, my name is Sadiq Moore, Sadiq Sport Ice. I wanted to thank you guys for having this program. Similar to what the gentleman said here about Southwest Philadelphia and then kind of what you talked about earlier, particularly in West Philadelphia, particularly the 60th Street corridor. Yes, the 60th Street corridor is a really, really bad rap, in terms of for the crime and drugs and things like that. It's a lot of positive work that's happening in the area. And it's a lot of people that's doing a lot of work and a lot of unsung heroes and stuff in the area, in the community. And outside of these traditional non-profits that's coming in, swooping in, getting money and resources, that's not really helping the community. There's a number of people that's actually really doing real work in the community that does not have a non-profit, that doesn't get any kind of funding, but have a genuine love and concern and passion for the community. So I would love to see you guys come out and do more work and covering more stories and find out about more of the people that's doing a lot of the real work, in our community, particularly the 6th Street corridor.
Can I go walking around
Yes,
with you?
yes, okay.
Can I go walking around with you?
Absolutely.
All right, let's set that up.
I'll go ahead and take you on a tour. Personally, my wife, this is my wife, go ahead, Sharia. She'll go ahead and fuss me out for it, not me saying about myself. I generally don't like talking about myself, but we'll talk about that, about a lot of the people who's really doing a lot of the work and stuff in the communities.
Okay.
Okay, so let's give a round of applause for our wonderful fellows. Doing the work you do, and thank you for sharing your stories, some of them with us tonight. They're going to stick around, so if there are any questions you didn't get a chance to ask, you can hang out with them one-on-one. Michael, thank you so much for being a wonderful moderator. Thank you so much to our friends at First Trust Bank for sponsoring this, and most of all, thank you all for coming out and spending some time with us at the Inquirer. So we hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for being here.